This is Paddy Duddy from D.O.A, and you are listening to the Nothing Shocking podcast.
Want to know what's going on in the world of music? Then tune in to the Nothing Shocking podcast, a non-genre based, all ages friendly rock and roll program. Join us weekly for interviews with all your favorite rock stars from the mainstream to the underground. You can find us at nothingshocking.libsyn.com or anywhere you download podcasts.
We're putting the band back together.
The numbers all go to 11.
I'm talking about bands that rock. Led Zeppelin. What about Sabbath? AC/DC. Motorhead.
Does that mean it's louder? Is it any louder?
Well, it's one louder, isn't it?
We're not worthy! We're not worthy!
Why don't you just make 10 louder and make 10 be the top number and make that a little louder?
These go to 11.
I get up off the ground and raise my head. Days like this, think I should be dead. One for Satan, two for me. Let's cheat the devil, it's fun, don't you agree?
Welcome to the Nothing Shocking podcast. I'm your co-host, Jeff Untied, and with me in Dog Bowl Studios is
Coach Nuz.
You can find the Nothing Shocking podcast on Libsyn or any podcatchers. Like our Facebook page or follow us on Twitter at NoShockPod.
You can also find the Nothing Shocking podcast on Rock Rage Radio every Sunday morning at 7 a.m. Central Time. Our sponsor is Ragged Records, located in downtown Rock Island, Illinois, and downtown Davenport, Iowa. We'd like to thank the Hong Kong Sleepover for allowing us to use their music for our intro and bumper ending. Tonight's guest is
Paddy Duddy from D.O.A.
Yeah, drummer.
Yeah.
Promoting some shows they got coming up here in April in Canada.
And Washington, state of Washington.
Yeah, so hang tight for that. If you're big DOA fans in the Canada, British Columbia area and state of Washington, get out there, go see them.
Yeah. Good night.
Good night. Paddy, welcome to the Nothing Shocking podcast. I'd like to introduce you, my co-host, Jeff Untied.
Paddy, thanks for joining us tonight.
Hey, guys, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, well, thanks for all the correspondence. I think we've been corresponding with you probably better part of the year to try to get this done, so we finally got it done tonight.
Yeah. Yes, I'm glad, and thanks for being patient with me.
Absolutely.
Because I know it was a while ago when you first mentioned it.
Yeah, for sure. So, are you vacationing down in Mexico, or what's going on down there?
Kind of. Like we had some time off. We had a couple months off between tours, and I came down. I'm in a city called Guanajuato. I came down here. I'm going to like a Spanish school to kind of work on my Spanish. So I'm doing that. And yeah, kind of just hanging out and doing vacation-y stuff.
Oh, very good.
Nice.
Well, Jeff and I will both be down there in Cancun in about 3 weeks. So, but
can't wait.
Yeah, you're in central Mexico, correct?
Yeah, central. It's like I actually really like it here because it's kind of cooler at nights. It's almost like I'd say like almost even cold at night, which is great for sleeping. There's no there's kind of like no beaches or anything like that close by, which is a little bit of a drag, but like I'm like, Irish, super pasty white. I don't really like the beach that much anyway. So like this area kind of suits my fancy. And plus because I'm kind of trying to learn Spanish, it's like, this is an area that there's just not very many English speakers here. So it kind of forces you to, step out of your comfort zone a wee bit.
So how is your Spanish?
It's okay. I've had, I don't know, like 2 years of going pretty hard with it. So it's okay. Like my understanding is a lot better than my speaking, and please don't ask me to speak on this podcast because it will not happen. But yeah, no, it's okay. I'm working on it. Like DOA is going on to South America at the end of the year. That's the plan anyway. So, it'll be nice to have a little bit for, that trip. For certain parts of that trip anyway. So.
Oh, very good. Well, let's get into the music now. So DOA will be performing 6 dates in April between Canada and the state of Washington, the U.S. here. 2 of those dates are in support of Fear, Leaving and Fear. Can you talk a little bit more about the rest of the 2023 tour schedule for D.O.A.?
Definitely, yeah. So we got that little run there, which it was pretty short. And then after that, this is hilarious. Like you're asking like the worst guy about this stuff because I don't really pay that much attention. But like we have, I know we have some Canadian shows in April and May for sure. We're going out to Eastern Canada, I think in June, something like that. We go back to Europe in July. We're going to be there for I think 3 weeks, and after July 17th. And there's Japan is pitched right now. We have a guy who's looking at booking a bunch of Japan stuff for I think November, and then there's South America, but I'm not 100% sure when those dates are either. Basically, Joe and our agent, they book all this stuff, and they kind of send me like, Joe's like, Paddy, July 17th to August 10th is Europe, and then okay, that's cool. So I just know that time is Europe, and then I'll be looking at my Facebook feed, and I'll see a poster pop up for, looks like we're playing in Germany with these guys at this point. I mean, like the drummer's always the last to know kind of deal.
The Canadian / state of Washington shows, you'll be supporting, or Fear will be supporting D.O.A., or I don't know how that's going to work. Have you guys toured with, or have you played a lot of shows in the past with Leaving and Fear?
No, this is actually not, definitely not in my time in the band, and not even much before that. I went down to Portland just before the pandemic. I went down and saw them, and kind of hung out and got to know Lee a little bit. He's a pretty cool guy, but that was my first time ever actually seeing them or meeting them. And then this was just pitched. We were supposed to actually do, I think, a bunch more dates, but I think it didn't work out for some reason. Like maybe those guys only want to play weekends, and D.O.A. is like, when we go on the road, we kind of no days off kind of. Joe likes to just, if we have like 30 dates, we play 30 shows. You know what I'm saying? We don't really like to take days off and stuff. Joe's still a road warrior after all these years.
Oh, very good.
Yeah. So when you're on tour, do you ever have, like, when you get back, do you ever suffer from any kind of post-tour depression or anything like that, where you just don't know what to do with yourself when you get home, or how does it work for you?
Definitely not. I really enjoy being on tour, and I really love being at home. I live in a small town. Actually, I think you guys talked to Mike as well, didn't you?
Yeah.
Mike, our bass player.
Yes.
Yeah. So we live in the same town. We live in a really small little kind of mountain town, and I got a beautiful, amazing wife, and I run like every washed up punk rocker, I run a screen printing business, printing T-shirts, and I really enjoy that aspect of my life as well. So I'm always kind of like ready to go on tour, and I'm always stoked to get back home for a wee bit. So I don't know, like I don't suffer from that as much, but also like this point in at least D.O.A.'s career, the tour schedules aren't as heavy as they used to be, like we'll go out like 3 weeks. 3 weeks is a good, like a good sized tour for us. We don't go out for 2 months or 3 months or any of that stuff anymore, so it's kind of like, so I think if I was doing those kind of stints, both ends, it would be a little bit more difficult, but no, I don't really get depressed after tour, nor like even when the pandemic happened, I honestly really enjoyed the break. Like I almost feel bad saying it, but it was nice to have that much time off to, like I did things like domestic things, like I cleaned my basement, and I started learning Spanish, doing all this kind of stuff, that, I kind of always wanted to do, but just been really busy with different stuff like that.
Oh, very good. I know you might have answered this question, but when you first came into DOA opposed to now, how has Joe, how has he approached the touring schedule from when your inception into the band until DOA present day? Has it changed much at all?
Yes, it definitely has. When I first joined the band, we were doing like a lot. We were doing like 100 shows a year or more. And even now, because Joe's a city councilor, in Burnaby here or up in Canada, we still are pretty busy, but it's definitely, I think we're kind of doing more like, I'm going to say 50 or 60 shows a year, something like that. So the schedule has slowed down, mostly because Joe, he found himself a day job as well, right? So it's a little bit more difficult for him to get away, but he still manages, like, even though he's got a pretty important role in governing Burnaby, British Columbia, he still manages to get away for, little bits here and there. When I first joined the band, it was actually Joe was on the 2013 farewell tour, so that's like 10 years ago, and it was supposedly, it was one of these situations where, when he was talking to me about it, I'm like, well, how many shows is this? Like, realistically, am I going to get? Like, am I going to be playing like how many shows are left? And he never really would answer the question. And so I wasn't really sure but here I am 10 years later, and it's like, it's still going. But at the time, when I first joined, I didn't know if I was going to be doing 10 or 20 DOA shows or, 100 or 500, like it has been. I'm sure I've done 500 or 600 at this point.
Wow. Very good.
Well, when you first join the band, you always have that grace period where you feel like the newbie. But after so many years, do you feel like you're a full-fledged part of the band, or how's the band dynamics work for you guys?
I'm still doing my best working on it. I'm still fumbling my way through the whole process. It was a very last minute thing for me. It was kind of short notice. How it all began. Joe was selling a guitar. I played in bands before, back in the 90s, opening for DOA, like every single band in Canada, and then on into the 2000s, I was in another band that also opened for DOA, and so I just knew Joe from like playing shows with him, and then he was selling his guitar, and I ran a t-shirt shop, so I thought, oh man, I got a good idea. I'll see if Joe wants to, I'll make him a bunch of DOA shirts and trade for this guitar. It'll be really cheap for me just because the guy can make the shirts personally and trade him for his guitar. So we made it like 10 years ago. I just wrote him and said, hey Joe, instead of selling that nice SG there, why don't you just trade it for like a whole whack of DOA shirts? And Joe's like, yeah, Paddy, that's a good idea. Let's do it. So I made up all these T-shirts, and I drove to Vancouver and dropped off these T-shirts. And just at that time, he mentioned, I might be looking for a drummer. And at the time, I didn't say anything. I just came home because the last band actually that we toured with DOA actually was a bass player and a singer in that band. So, it was like it wasn't like he would even know me as much of a drummer. So then I linked a few days later. I just said, I'll give him a ring, and I said, hey Joe, just see if you want, I could possibly do that job if you're looking for a drummer, depending on what it all entails or whatever. And he kind of got back to me like, okay, whatever, I thought you were a bass player, but like he kind of just got back to me, and it didn't really go anywhere. And then it was kind of a little bit more of a, hey, like seriously, he just sent me an email and just said, hey, you're in DOA. I never even tried out or anything. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that's interesting. And then I had to fly. I was in Ireland at the time. I had to fly to Canada, and I had 4 practices, which I sucked so bad. I couldn't really do it very good. And I was just like, uh-oh. But Joe was just kind of like, okay, well, we're in it now. Like, we're in it. So we went down to Portland, and we played our first show with MDC. There was like a packed, giant room, packed out. We were headlining. It was my very first show. I did not have my shit together. I was just like, I just wasn't really ready. I wasn't really fully prepared for what it takes to be a drummer in that band. Like DOA is quite known for, having great drummers, right?
Yes.
And, and I was like, definitely feeling that kind of pressure, So anyway, so we did those first run down through the States, and then Joe didn't fire me, which I was really surprised. And then, and he's like, oh, we're going, where are we going? We were going to Australia and China next. So I was like, okay, so I guess eventually Joe's going to figure out that I can't pull it off. But Joe's really a great dude in many ways. He is like, he did something for me, which was super cool. And I know I'm rambling on about this particular point, but that very first show, I was like, Joe, like, we're about to go on stage, and I'm like, I'm panicking Skywalker. I'm just like, Joe, hey, tell the audience that you're working in a new drummer, like that I've only been here for 4 days. Like, tell the audience, like, Paddy showed up 4 days ago, so like, so they don't freak out and go, what the hell is this guy doing, right? And Joe's like, he's like, fuck that, Paddy. He's like, whatever we play, that's what D.O.A. plays. He's like, well, we're not making excuses. He's like, whatever you do, that's how D.O.A. is right now. Yeah. So just go out and do whatever you're going to do. Doesn't matter. And I was like, you know what? That's really cool. He's like, he's kind of supportive, even though I know that, I just wasn't cutting the mustard. But anyways, I kind of got the hang of it. 10 years later, I'm starting to remember some of these songs. So it's going better. Yeah. Anyways.
Well, with that being said, with D.O.A.'s massive body of work, how does Joe put a set list together for a tour? I mean, because it's massive.
Yeah.
Totally. So there's songs that you just can't get away with not playing, right? So, like we have, I'm going to say, at least half of the set, or 70% of the set maybe never can change, because basically you have these, like, they are hits, like, that you just got to play. Like, we always play World War III, we always play The Enemy, we always play The Prisoner. And then after that, Joe selects, he often puts together, we always have, like, I think I've done 3 albums with D.O.A. now. So he always picks, like, a few songs that are off either, like, 1 or 2 off the last album and 1 or 2 off the one before, because he wants to, he just wants to always still promote the stuff that we're still working on. So he'll pick a couple of those songs. And then there's this kind of really great era of D.O.A., but it's a little bit of a, I'd say, underappreciated era of D.O.A., which is kind of like that 90s 13 Flavors of Doom, the Black Spot, those records that are really great records, but they never really, I don't think, at least these days, D.O.A. is really just known, like, really popular for those really early albums. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people kind of tend to forget those kind of really great 90s records that were there. So usually we pull, there's 1 or 2 songs kind of from that era as well, like, get thrown into the set. but generally, like, Joe will hand us a set list. I'd like if he like, we're going on a tour in, say he's going to Europe, and then, often I'll hassle Joe, like, hey man, send us the European set list, so we kind of know what he's thinking. And sometimes it can come, like, a little bit late, so you don't really have a lot of time to review if there's some material on there that is kind of a surprise or whatever. But it usually works out fine. But yeah, that's kind of how it works. Joe has, like, a set of songs that we just play every time. Disco sucks. Like I've never played a show without playing any of those songs that I mentioned. And then, like I say, then, like, for the 30%, then that's where just the relax factor is. Sometimes Joe will throw in things like real surprises for us. Like one time when it was like the second time I was in China with him, we were playing in Beijing, and the audience is like, some guy in the audience, or a bunch of guys are screaming for Already Dead, which is kind of it is one of those 90s songs that I kind of really like, but we had never played it. So Joe turns around to me, hey Paddy, do you know Already Dead? And I'm like it's on stage, like, towards the end of the set. And I'm like, well, yeah, Joe, I know the song, but I don't know how to play it. And he's like, well, that's just great. We're going to play it anyway. And turns around and starts the fucking song, and then we play it, and I'm terrible at it. And because Ken Jensen, the drummer who drums on that song, is another, D.O.A. legend, right? So, get off the stage, and Joe's like, hey, what the hell is Already Dead? I'm like, fucking hell, mate. Like, I didn't even get one practice with that one. It was just on stage, fucking first time I ever played it. But then Joe's done that a few times where he's, like, pulled out stuff, you have to kind of keep your stick on the ice.
Yeah. All right. Well, Mike might have, he might have answered this question for me when we interviewed him, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Treason, with being the last D.O.A. studio album released during the pandemic, during 2020, did Joe have any reservations about releasing that album during the pandemic? And how did it all work out? Because it's been such a blur since then.
Yeah, that's a really great question. The album was so topical because it was like the album cover had like Giuliani and Trump and Putin on the cover. Like it was at the time, it was just really, really topical. And so it wasn't like it was an album that we could, let's just sit on that and wait to release it, or anything like that. It's an album just had to come out. So yeah, it just came out, but we just couldn't tour it. All of a sudden everything just kind of, went to shit, obviously. And then maybe I could be doubling up on stories here, but we were on a great tour with the Dead Kennedys down through the States, kind of East Coast, New York, kind of. I think we were on our third or fourth show with them, and it was like we had to leave the tour, and because at that point we didn't know what was happening. Canada was talking about closing its borders, to people, entering the country. It was like March, I think 12th or something like that, right when everything was getting really weird, like every club we were playing or every bar we were playing was like that. We were the last show because everyone was shutting down as this tour was going on. And we're just like, this is really weird. Yeah. So we went home and then sat on our hands for a year and a half like everybody else. But yeah, so that record kind of just never really had we never had a chance to really promote or tour it, so it was a bit unfortunate because that's what obviously bands do, as you guys I'm sure are well aware of. You put out a record, you got to go on the road and try to get people to at least buy a couple of copies off of the merch table. But that we just really didn't get that happening.
Yeah, very good. Jeff, you got the next one?
Well, what's next in store for D.O.A? Are you guys working on any new tracks, or do you guys got anything you're working on right now?
Not really recording-wise. There's a documentary that's being made about Joe's political life and his punk rock life.
Yeah.
So, there's like I said, there's a bit I couldn't be more specific about the tours because I just don't really remember. But there's quite a bit of touring happening this year, and then early next year, I think it's going to be January 2024. There's this documentary's coming out, which is going to be cool. I think it's going to be cool anyway. The guy who's making it is a really rad dude, and called Scott Crawford. He's like the Salad Days cat.
Oh, yeah.
But anyways, yeah, he's just a really, really, really cool guy. I think he's going to do a great job. So I think the deal is I think January 2024. We're kind of doing some film festivals and playing in and around those film festivals. We're kind of like both of those things are happening at the same time, promoting that and kind of touring that. So I don't see that there's going to be another album out. Or I don't know if there'll be another album out, at least not anytime soon. But also anything can happen. Joe could literally call me tomorrow and say, "Paddy, fly here. We're going to record a record in 3 days." Yeah. That's generally how it works.
Yeah. Well, you did have...
so it could happen.
Well, you do have another band, the Kill Rats, and you guys had an album out, a self-titled album out in 2022. Can you give our listeners a little more insight into your other band?
Yeah, that's a band based out of Nelson, a fairly new band. It was formed during the pandemic. Because we have, like I say, I got a screen printing company, and one of the guys who screen prints there is named Kevin, and he's kind of the mastermind behind that band. And because we were all in our little bubble together and nobody was leaving, we thought, let's put together a band and record a record. And literally it's all Kevin's the mastermind. We dress as rats, like we have these rat costumes that are kind of cool, and the record got a cool record out, and the cover was done by this fella called Tom Bagley he's from a band called Forbidden Dimension in Calgary, Alberta, and those guys are great. They're a great band, and he's a great artist, so he did a pretty cool kind of Kiss Unmasked inspired kind of cartoon album cover. And so that album just came out, like, I don't know, I'm going to say, I'm bad with time, but like maybe 6 months ago or something like that. And then we're doing just a short Western Canadian tour in May. And I play bass in that band.
Oh, okay.
To kind of double off of Jeff's question about the Kill Rats, how do you view the Kill Rats? Is this a project, or is this going to be a long-term band for you and the rest of the band members?
Oh, I think long term. Like, I'm ready. We're we're after this tour. We're not going to do too much to the end of the year, just because there's just so much DOA stuff and other things happening for all the members. But we're already looking at a U.S. run, a Western U.S. run early next year, and going to Europe. Hopefully, going to Europe as a support band sometime in 2024.
Oh, very good.
And it's good. It's lucky for me because, I've met a lot of really great people that can kind of help out. Like, we don't really, I can approach some of the connections that I kind of made through DOA and kind of work those angles a little bit and be like, hey, here's my other little band. But it's another project, but to me, it's just another band and a really cool band at that.
Oh, nice. Very good. More generalized here, the punk scene in the United States kind of varies from state to state or region to region. As far as Canada goes, what is the punk scene like these days?
I'd ask somebody like 30 years younger than me, and because I live in a small town. We have a pretty cool little scene in the town. There's a few great bands. Tar Holes is a great band to check out from Nelson, British Columbia. They just put out a record as well. But we have a pretty cool little scene in the town. But as far as Canada's scene goes, I don't know. I always like to think that there is tons of cool young punk bands that I haven't heard of or don't know of that are putting on shows and killing it in little small towns that I've never been to. I kind of hope that's what's happening. When I first kind of got into it in the 80s, I was I think it was 15 years old when I went to my first punk show. There was just this great kind of all ages scene that was super important to me. And it's kind of like that and skateboarding were the things that totally saved my life, back, going through all those weird teenage years. Mm-hmm. So, as far as the punk scene, when DOA plays in Tours Canada, we play with great bands and the shows are packed and Canadian fans are amazing. But DOA's been around a long time, and it has we have, everybody has a DOA story. Every Canadian, it's like a rite of passage for Canadians, right?
Yeah.
So it's like everyone's got a DOA story. But so as far as the scene goes and stuff like that, it's really easy for me to say it's killing it because it's easy for DOA. I hope the scene is thriving in small, towns in Saskatchewan where there's young bands putting on shows and their friends are coming out and people are putting out records and I hope that's really popping off. But I don't know. I guess I say I'm 51 years old. I'd say I'm almost as out of touch as you can get for somebody in a punk rock scene.
Yeah, fair enough. Jeff, you got the next one?
Well, let's talk about your drum kit a little bit. I guess, as long as we're here on the podcast, we can talk about drums. So I'm not a drummer myself, but, I admire drums and, watching, one guy will have a real small, I'm amazed at the sound he gets with just a few small kit. And then somebody will have a massive kit all the way around. What do you use?
Well, I'm one of those small drum kit kind of guys. Yeah, really small, a little 4-piece, but single pedal, 1 foot on the hi-hat, pretty meat and potatoes kind of, drumming, and definitely I'd say a smaller kind of, humbler drum set. But for years and years I played exactly the same drum set. For ages, since I think it was 1991 when I accidentally stole but got caught and paid back this drum set from Tommy Music in Vancouver. I was like 19 years old.
Yeah.
I went in, and when you can make easy monthly payments. I don't know why. I don't know why they did it, but anyways, they gave me this green Canwood, which is a Canadian brand drum set, and let me walk out the door with only paying like $60 down, and then I never made a payment, and then finally they caught up with me, a collection agency. I was young and stupid, but anyways, I ended up paying it off, and I played that drum set up until pretty much, I'm going to say, not even a year ago, like maybe 6 or 8 months ago. We were on tour out east, and often, when you play in other, always when you play kind of anywhere that's not close to home, you use backline. You use equipment that's supplied by, like some rental company or whatever, right? So we did like 2 weeks or something out east, and I rented this drum set, this D.O.A, which is like a really nice brand. I don't know if you guys remember or know much about drums, but this is a really kind of a high-end brand compared to what I'm used to. This really nice black, pretty new-looking, sleek D.O.A drum set, and I played it for the whole tour, and it was rented from Long McQuaid, which is a music store in Canada. And when the tour was nearly finished, I was like, man, I really like this drum set. I was kind of like, sad to return it. So I actually phoned Long McQuaid, and I said, will you guys sell me this drum set? And they're like, yeah, but it's pretty expensive because, it's still pretty new and in really good shape because it hasn't really been rented much. So, of course, I was like, well, I actually have a lot of say in what kind of shape this drum set is returned in right now because I still have it for the next 3 days. So I can adjust the price pretty easily here, like just jokingly with them or whatever, right? So, anyways, I returned the drum set, and as I was dropping it off, I was like, and I was dropping it off in Toronto, and I was like, I kind of fell in love with this drum set, and I said, will you guys ship it to Vancouver? And so we worked out a deal, and I bought this, so I have a kind of a fancy drum set now. I went from a total kind of clunker for years and years, but now I've kind of just leveled up to this kind of like, kind of just a little bit higher end drum set, D.O.A.
Yeah.
They shipped it back to Vancouver for me, and I picked it up, and that's kind of what I've been playing. I'm gonna say for the last 6 months or something like that. So, like, I'd like to have a D.O.A sponsorship. Like, those guys. That's a great drum company. So I'm gonna just say, just in case somebody from D.O.A is listening to this podcast, that I'd love to be sponsored by them, because what they'll do then is every time I fly to a different country, there'll be a D.O.A set, just like mine, waiting for me. As it sits right now, you go to these different countries, and it's kind of, you get whatever you get.
Yes.
So anyways, yeah. So that's, I play a really simple, but like now, as of 6 months ago, I play a really simple but high quality 4-piece little kit.
Nice,
very good. Technology is kind of killed the music industry to a certain degree, because you see now people making music that are not even artists, and they're on TikTok, and they can make songs out of nothing, and they don't even play an instrument. They just press a button on their laptop or whatever, and they've created a song. For you, the artist and the fan, how detrimental is the simplicity of technology to the music industry?
Well, that's another good question. I don't think, honestly, at all. I'd love to be a young guy with a computer and press enter and write a song that everybody digs. You know what I mean? Without having to put all those, doing stupid rudiments and stuff for years and years. Just to kind of become an average drummer. I would say I'd say that whatever is in the hands of young people, and if they're creating music with that, whether they're considered musicians or not, I don't think that matters. If they, if they come up with something that sounds cool, like, more power to them. I wish I could come up with something cool on a computer. So I don't really think it's wrecking anything. it's always, to me, it's always the fans that decide, right? So it's like, if people are super stoked on electronic music that, people are writing in their bedroom on their computer, then awesome. Then that's I'm all for it 100%. It's making people happy. And, I don't think it's and this is just my opinion. There's other musicians I'm sure would not agree with this, but I don't think it's a prerequisite to be called a musician or something like that, or to have worked on something really, really, your whole life, to create music that other people like. I think if you can come in and you bang two fucking pots together and I don't know, rhyme some beats over that and people dig it, then fuck, I'd buy that record, So I don't think so. I don't think so. I think more power to him, man. More power to him. Anybody who can do anything and make other people stoked on it, that's awesome.
Yeah, awesome.
Fair enough. Last question for you, then we'll finally leave you alone for the evening. The mystery of rock and roll. I ask this to all of our guests, but with the dawning of the internet and social media, we no longer have mystery. Motley Crue doesn't have a mystery anymore. Guns N' Roses doesn't have a mystery anymore. With that being said, social media has given us all this accessibility to artists. And if we didn't have social media and the internet, we wouldn't be doing this with you right now. So for you as the artist, what do you prefer? Do you miss the mystery of rock and roll, or do you like this new age of accessibility?
Man, it's that's another great question. I both, of course, because music to me, when I was a little kid getting into punk rock, I was 9 years old when I first discovered it. I used to literally put money in an envelope and send away to England, and 6 months later, hopefully a record would show up, maybe. I would buy magazines and order obscure things from the back of magazines and I'd write bands letters by hand, and sometimes they'd write back, and so I definitely feel nostalgic for those years of music, for sure. But I was also in I've been in bands since 1986, since I was 15 years old. And what it took to record, what it took in 1986, or even in the 90s when I was, in touring bands, what it took to put out a record and have the world hear that record was is extremely difficult and extremely expensive and extremely unlikely for anybody, So. Yeah. So I feel my heart feels nostalgic for those days. It was just because you nailed it. There was a mystery to music that captured my imagination when I was a young music fan, a punk rock fan, specifically a punk rock fan, and then being in the band on the other side of that, when I see bands now, we spent $10,000 in 1991 or 92 to record an album that we had to record it in the nighttime because the daytime studio time was too expensive. So when we had day jobs, so we had to go in at 10 o'clock at night and record until 6 o'clock in the morning because that was the cheap time, and do this to put out a shitty sounding record. You know what I mean? So and then how to get that record distributed and into record shops, it never happened, we just couldn't do it, it was just so difficult. So that part on the band side of things, I think these changes have been incredibly positive. Now it's harder for bands to make money with things like Spotify and all that other, it's harder to, make money off your song, but man, it's ever easier to get the apples to market. You know what I mean? If you have an awesome song, the whole world has the potential of hearing it within a day or two of it being released. So that part there, I think is highly beneficial to the artist and highly beneficial to the audience because of accessibility. Because you can get access and find all these really, really neat things. And, there was a band from Ireland, my hometown in Ireland where I was born is called Derry. And there was this young band from Derry that came over I brought them over in 2018 just to do a little West Coast tour just for fun. They were called Lost Avenue. They've changed their name now. But they when they came over, they were playing me this music, punk songs, artists that I had never heard of, never been exposed to, that I was able to afterwards go out and get all of their stuff and listen to all of their shit. And then the stuff that I really kind of got into, I was able to order records and that kind of stuff. And just that really, that just never was as accessible. So yeah, both. I'm glad I grew up in the time that I did do of corresponding with bands through mail and seeing bands in real life, and my mind being just absolutely blown wide open. Because no means no. That's a Canadian band, very famous Western Canadian band. First time I saw them, I was convinced from the music that I heard that these guys were going to be like these cool punk rocker looking dudes and whatever. And I went to the show for the first time, and then these guys that went on stage that kind of looked like, to me they looked ancient. They were probably in their 30s at the time, but they looked like these old businessmen with kind of gray hair, and I'm like, is this band's dads carrying their equipment on the stage for them? I couldn't figure out what was going on. And then because I never really seen them before, you know what I mean? I'd only listened to the record, and the record didn't have a picture, and there was nowhere for me to go look what they looked like. You know what I mean? Because they weren't on television or anything, right? So I just had no idea. And then I watched these guys on stage, and they absolutely melted the faces off the entire audience. They were just so incredibly good. It just blew my mind. The first time I saw the Melvins, I hadn't even heard a Melvins record. I just knew, there's a Melvins is a punk band. I was a bit of a poser, so I was like, yeah, maybe we'll see the Melvins, man, but I hadn't even heard them. I go see the Melvins, and they're like, these guys come on stage, and I'm waiting for the songs to play fast punk rock because I'm really into that super fast stuff, and the songs just keep getting slower and slower and slower, and I'm like, is this terrible, or is this the greatest thing I've ever seen in my entire life? But my mind was blown open, right? The next day at school, I'm going, the whole show, I was waiting for them to go fast. I thought it was a build up for them to just start ripping, but no, they just got slower and slower, and at the end, Buzz leaned his guitar up against his amp and started chewing on the corner of his amp for 5 minutes, and then walked off stage. I was just like, what did I just see? I felt like I was accosted, right? So and then I go to school the next day and said, the Melvins are the greatest band in the world. Because it just blew my mind. You kids these days will never get that, because you're going to watch the videos on YouTube. You're going to know exactly what you get by the time you get to see the show. There's no, that mystery I do miss. So, but there's, like I say, that's a really, that's a tough one, because I think there's so many benefits, and there is something that kids are missing. They don't get to get their faces melted off by the Melvins for the first time, like out of the blue like that,
Well, Jeff and I will both agree with you. We've seen the Melvins numerous times, and every time you see them, it's a life-changing experience.
Yeah, totally. So imagine being 15 and just going and thinking you're going to see some kids with mohawks, and it's these guys come up on stage, and it's so fucking loud, and it's so slow. And Dale's drumming, right? I was a drummer at the time, and I was, I thought all you needed to know was one beat, and then you're a punk rock drummer for life. But Dale comes out, and he's just like, oh my goodness, this guy is the hardest hitting drummer I've ever seen. And there's 5 seconds, it felt like, between drum hits. It was just drawing the soul out of me. I was just like, it was an awakening for sure. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Very cool.
So we're out of our allotted time for the evening. Is there anything that we left off tonight that you would like to plug or promote?
No, just that, there's a cool D.O.A. documentary coming out. Watch out for the Kill Rats. If you can get that record, you can order that record online. That's about it. I just want to say thanks for having me on the show, guys, and it was great chatting.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. I'm so glad we finally got you on.
Yeah.
Because I know we were doing a lot of corresponding, trying to get things going here, but this has been a pleasure. This is how things are going to work out. We're about 3 weeks before this episode will be ready to be released, but once Jeff, the editing wizard over here, gets it all cleaned up, I will send it to you immediately. And please share it wherever you can. Yeah,
I'll do that for sure, guys. And thanks a lot for doing this kind of stuff like this when we're just talking about the music scene and all this kind of, what goes on in the music scene and modern things and not modern things. One of the things that I just totally love is you got, independent people out there promoting independent bands. It's it's a beautiful thing. So I appreciate that you guys do this.
Thank you so much. It has been a blast.
Yeah, we enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yeah, right on, guys. Yeah, well, maybe we'll talk again down the road.
Hope so. I'll be in touch with you in about 3 weeks. Sound good?
Okay, sounds good.
Take care of yourself. Yep, bye-bye.
Bye.
If they ever take from you, then